Helen Zille joins me now from Cape Town. Helen Zille, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. What led to this decision?
Good evening, Vuyo. Well, I'm certainly not sick of being in retirement. I love retirement, and I've had a wonderful couple of months. I've had wonderful nights of long sleep and played with my grandchildren and started doing podcasting and other forms of technological communication, which I've really loved, done a lot of policy work. So I've had a really good time. I think that it's time for me to put my hat in the ring, and if I am elected, I really want to throw my weight in support of the DA's attempt to consolidate and stabilize its position up till the 2021 election. That is my objective. I think there's a lot I can do to help in a supporting role, not in the leader's role at all, but in a supporting role, and I would like to bring some of my experience to bear on that.
The position you are applying for is hardly a supportive role. That's how you may refer to it in the DA, but for all real and practical reasons, it is not a supportive role. It's a leadership role in its own right.
In its own right, it is the role where everything comes together in the sense of the systems, the structures, the processes of the Democratic Alliance. It is the point at which all the cogs of the wheels have to mesh properly. And yes, it is a very important role, but it's not an upfront role. It is a background support role to the leadership team.
Well, you're doing this because some people have approached you. Now, we've heard that from many leaders who refuse to go away and allow other people to take over.
Well, as you know, I voluntarily stepped down. I tried to do that repeatedly over a long period of time. It was very challenging, and I'm certainly not trying to get in the way of any leadership succession at all. I'm very committed to supporting the leadership election outcomes of the party, and I was very happy to go away, believe me, because I've got a long career ahead of me in other fields. But I have decided that to help stabilize the party right now, it was the right thing to do, to put my hat in the ring.
Now, you are a very powerful personality within the DA. First of all, as a former leader, but also how you carry yourself. You are not the one to be muzzled. You say things the way you feel they should be said. You've rubbed people up the wrong way on so many occasions.
Yes, Vuyo. Some of those were real people. Others were bots and trolls with their own agenda. But I do speak my mind. I think that's a very important attribute in politics, and I hope I'm forthright and honest.
And I think, it is with that in mind that your assertion that this is a supportive role is difficult to accept. Take the case of James Self. Even though he was playing that role, which you say or insist is a supportive role, so many decisions that could not really be explained were actually attributed to him, that he was the person actually running the party and whipping everyone into line if they happen to disagree with him.
Well, in the first instance, I don't think that that is correct. But in the second instance, the job descriptions of key positions in the party is currently undergoing review by a 3-person review team, and we'll see what comes out of that. All I can say is that whatever the job description is, I will stick to the job description, because I don't have to be the bride at every wedding or the corpse at every funeral. I can fit in very well behind the scenes and do a lot of support work where I have to. So I'm not doing this because I have any ambitions or dreams or goals any further. My only dream is to get South Africa's democracy to work really well, and the DA is a crucial part of that. If the DA fails, South Africa's democracy fails, and that would be too ghastly to contemplate.
How would you describe your relationship with Mmusi Maimane?
Cordial and decent.
It was once much better than that, wasn't it?
Well, you know, I strongly supported him to succeed me, very, very strongly supported him to succeed me, yes.
And then what happened?
Well, you know the story of what happened, but I'm not the kind of person who bears grudges. I get on with the things and I rebuild relationships. I always have.
Well, he's under enormous pressure at the moment. There are people, some of them in the institute who've just resigned from race relations, who feel that he must go. Do you share that sentiment?
The sentiment that was expressed by Herman Pretorius was his and his alone. He's a staff member of the South African Institute of Race Relations. He wrote a personal column, as many staff members do, in the online newspaper called The Daily Friend, and he's entitled to his own opinion. I don't happen to share what he said or the way he set it out, because it was open to misinterpretation, but the bottom line is that we should not be a race-driven party, and that is a principle I agree with and the DA has always agreed with.
But, I mean, race is not the issue that he raises in his column. He raises a few reasons, among them that Mmusi Maimane should be held responsible for the below-par performance that we saw coming from the DA in the May 8 election.
Well, that's par for the course for leadership. Leadership has always got to be accountable. Leadership comes with great risks and very few rewards, and accountability is one of the risks.
You don't think, or do you think, Mmusi Maimane should take responsibility for that less than ideal performance?
Well, firstly, he's not the only one who should accept responsibility, but as the leader, you are always there to take the weight of criticism, because you have to lead from the front, and you can take the credit for when things go well, but you also have to take the blame, at least in part, when things don't go well.
So he should take the blame.
All leaders who lead from the front have to take the punches and have to be accountable. That just goes with the position. Any leader, everywhere, just like I once had to do.
Remind us again, when you threw your weight and everything you had behind his candidature for the person to succeed you, what were your reasons?
Well, I've set out my reasons in my book, but I thought it was time for me to step back. I thought it was time for new blood. I thought he had performed very well in a number of different capacities, including the federal spokesperson of the DA, and I thought, great, well, now I can step back and go and focus on being the Premier of the Western Cape and get on with my life and enable somebody else to take over from me. That was what was in my mind.
Do you regret ever taking that position, having seen how he has performed over the years?
I don't regret things. When I take a decision, I do so with the information that I have available, in good faith, and I move forward.
Will you support him staying on as the DA leader?
I am going to be standing for the role of chairperson of the Federal Council, and it's certainly not that person's role to decide who the leadership is going to be. That gets elected at a Congress, and whoever is elected at a Congress, or whoever is the incumbent, will have my support, because that is in the job description of the chairperson of the Federal Council.
But when you get to your elective conference, that would, I mean, he would no longer be, he would have to be elected. Would you support his candidature, or will you look elsewhere?
Well, I have no idea who the candidates are going to be, so it's a bit of a premature question.
Well, I mean, there is the name of Alan Winde, the current Premier of the Western Cape. What do you think of him?
Well, Alan has said he's not available to stand, so that point is moot.
Do you think there are other leaders that your fellow DA members should perhaps be looking at?
Well, you know, anybody's free to stand as long as they remember in good standing of the DA. Anybody's free to stand.
Now, from where you sit, what are...
There's not even a Congress in the offing.
From where you sit, what are the challenges facing the DA at the moment? What stands in the way of you taking over from the ANC?
Well, there are many things. We are trying to do what is very, very difficult in a society of our composition, which is to be a party based on principle that brings people together on the basis of values and policies, and that doesn't pander to race or religion or the other attributes that tend to divide human beings. We're saying, let's form a new majority on the basis of principles, and those principles are non-racialism, the rule of law, an open market economy, the separation between party and state, all the things that make a democracy work. And that's very hard in a divided society, especially where there are such deep historical divisions based on race. So it's enormously hard. That is the first big obstacle we face. There are many others. We know that the history of transitions to democracy mostly end in failure, but the DA looks as if it could make South Africa an exception and turn us into a success, and that is what I've spent most of my life trying to achieve, and I want to continue doing that.
Now, there has been a great deal of disagreement around the issue of race, whatever names you throw at it, and that is, as far as some people are concerned, the biggest stumbling block, because as members or leaders of the DA in particular, you seem reluctant to actually confront that issue head on, and that, as far as many pundits are concerned, is the reason you are going to find it difficult to grow beyond the point where you are at the moment.
Well, it depends what you mean by confronting the issue of race head on. We don't believe in the kind of identity politics that says that people of one race have to stick together in terms of politics, in terms of principle, in terms of the decisions they make. We believe that people are individuals and can decide for themselves what their principles, their values, their sexuality, their lifestyle, their culture is going to be. And so we would like to bring together all South Africans that agree that people have that kind of choice, to make their own choices and to defend the choices of others. So we don't believe that race has to be entrenched for all time. We believe that we can achieve non-racialism, but then we have to have a very serious discussion around that and an ongoing process. It's not an event. It takes a long and difficult road, and we're on that road, and we need to achieve the goal.
But it is a determinant in South African politics. Whether people prefer to ignore it or find beautiful language to run away from it, race is a determinant in South African politics, and that's going to be the case for a very long time.
Well, if it is permanently the dividing line of politics in South Africa is going to be race, then we can't have a democracy. Because there will always be one party that always wins the elections based on the color of people's skins. And that means that you don't have the essentials of a democracy, which is a check and balance on power provided by voters who change their minds. If voters never change their minds because of the color of their skin, and if people just vote in a racial bloc, which I don't think they do, I think voters in a democracy are more mature than that. But if people continue to vote in a racial bloc permanently, and many people don't do that even now, but if that is to happen, South Africa can't be a democracy.